For the first time in 46 years, Black Creeks, also known as Creek freedmen, will now have their citizenship rights restored to the Muskogee Creek Nation. This will impact tens of thousands of Black Creeks throughout the nation who will not only receive their birthright and their citizenship rights, but also have opportunities to have tangible benefits, life-sustaining and altering benefits like free health care, child care, education benefits, etc.
Okay, so explain to folks, why would they have free health care, free child benefits? What, as a result of the Muskogee Nation? Explain that.
Sure. Well, the Muskogee Creek Nation was one of the five quote-unquote civilized tribes who in the late 1700s, early 1800s adopted European-style culture, speaking English and having a plantation-style economy. And a part of that was the enslavement of Africans and of their own indigenous Black members. And so when they was moved to Oklahoma in the 1830s and continued to enslave and continue to discriminate against their Black members, they sided with the Confederacy during the Civil War. They lost, obviously the Confederacy lost the war at the time, and so they had to do new treaties. And that treaty of 1866, which was negotiated and signed by 5 individuals, one of them being my 4-time great-grandfather, Cal Tom, ended enslavement within the Creek Nation, and it also granted citizenship to all Creeks of African descent. But in 1979, the Creek Nation decided they did not want the Creeks of African descent anymore, and they illegally excluded us through their new constitution. And so we've been fighting that battle ever since. And today, their own Supreme Court affirmed that the Treaty of 1866 guarantees Creeks of African descent, also known as Creek freemen, to have full citizenship within the Creek Nation.
For folks who
Grand Rising, y'all. Grand Rising. Let me get this started. Stop by the ATM. This is a day in the life of a tech. Maybe I should start changing up, and instead of calling them digital journals, call them a day in the life of the tech. Well, just a walkthrough for people, anybody that's new that has joined the channel. I really appreciate it. We're getting close to 200 subscribers. If I did the clickbait thing, I probably would have no more. I probably have maybe a couple thousand right now, but that ain't what we do over here. We cover tech from the Black American experience, and we're gonna sprinkle in. This is a pro freedmen's channel, you know, and this is a perspective to help all Black folks. But you know, this is coming from the Black American experience. That's not gonna change. You know. That's the intention of this platform and this channel. So y'all that's new to this, you see I do my little digital journals. I be talking shit. You know, I come up with little news articles that I hear about tech, or, you know, there be Black issues. The second book that I wrote, I had talked about what tangible should look like specifically for us, because we've been aggrieved like no other group, specifically in this country. And one of the things that I had mentioned is, you know, when you look at us from a consumer standpoint, Black Americans, our buying power, we have a big buying power. They say $1 trillion buying power, whatever the case may be. And not only the buying power, but you can't really put a number on our cultural buying power. Have y'all ever thought about that? That's like unlimited. That's like damn near Thor. We're like the Thor hammer when it comes to culture and coming up with new words and new styles and fashions and stuff like that. We don't try to be like anybody else. There's just nobody else we copy. The only thing people can say is, well, you know, you put conch in your hair. You know, Malcolm X at first put conch in his hair because he's trying to be European, whatever like that. People do that worldwide. They can try to say the hair thing. They can try to say the weave thing. But nah, as far as import, export, we export the most culture around the world. And we're so gracious, we kind of share it. It's been colonized and folks can't really duplicate it. You got people doing the fades, all of that. They can't duplicate it. Let me back up a little bit more. I ain't come close enough. There we go. I'm gonna get, let's see here. Get 14. That'll work just fine. Nobody, you know, nobody can't really duplicate it. They can try to copy it. You got Asian rappers rapping like Project Pat. We don't try to rap like nobody else. So when you look at our culture specifically makes things cool worldwide, specifically here. So I was thinking, I said, well, on top of a reparations claim, since we created it, hip hop, jazz, blues, country, all that, since we created all that, and we're the biggest export of tech, there should be reparations grants based on tech, because the entire digital media has exploited us. Digital blackface, this world star hip hop bullshit that we didn't create. That's from that was from some, he's passed now, but the person that founded that wasn't from somebody from us. That was some dude from the island somewhere, whatever the case may be. You know, and granted, there's some black rappers that took advantage of the promotion. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not just picking on him. His name was Q or Q Dog or something like that. I'm not just picking on him, but a lot of these website platforms, if you see who's running it, it don't come from folks where you bring to your grandma's house and pull up paperwork and say, all right, this was some folks that were from over here. They folks ain't from the deep south. And so that's why when you ask that question to some people and they say, well, it don't matter. When you look at our claim and we're saying what this land specifically owes us, we're coming from the perspective like, okay, this has been culturally ingrained in the United States. So I said, well, you know what? Part of the chapter that I had wrote, wait for this guy. Part of the chapter that I wrote, I said we need to have some tech grants. I'm talking about just cash payment tech grants. Like everybody else, we need to have a Kubernetes, a Docker, specifically for our folks, specifically for our lineage that comes from the killing fields of the American South. That should even be built in, because we're too big of consumers. We need to have a what I call it. I call it Silicon Gardens. Remember what happened in Altgeld Gardens when they put all them black folks in Chicago? That was a concept that I came up with. Chicago was a very, very large black city. A whole lot of culture comes from Chicago. The Delta Blues went up to Chicago. You dig? Chicago Blues, as they called it. That comes from Mississippi. That, you know, that migration, that back and forth. Black folks was going back and forth, Mississippi, back and forth, visiting their home. Visiting, you know, that's their home. That's their homeland, Mississippi. We have hundreds and hundreds of years in these states. And with the Cherokee, let's get back to the tech real quick. The chapter when I was writing about, I said, well, you know, we're huge consumers. We need to be developers of that. that should also be part of it. And it shouldn't just be, well, oh, it's just, you're just getting a tech program and you're just getting a grant. And then they send us off to some white-owned establishment where they take the money, typically like what happens with the Urban League and stuff. And I remember I talked to y'all about that. And then the money don't go back to the community. And you got some people out in the suburbs that get it. No, we need our own tech training centers on top of cash payments. On top of cash payments. And it should be ongoing. On top of cash payments. So that's something that I had thought about. Now there opens up a new door. Now this lawyer that won the citizenship for the Supreme Court, he took it all the way to the Supreme Court and ran with it. That his brother, his family was enslaved by, you know, the Creeks or the Cherokees or whatnot. So I think his family was Creeks. They was on the Dawes roll. For folks that ain't familiar with that. You have some folks out here that might say, well, we was never on the Dawes roll or whatever. And nigga, this is American history. It's very, very simple. Some of us was on that Dawes roll. And what he was saying, he got on a broadcast and he was saying that not only was enslaved blacks walk through the trails of tears, but indigenous blacks walk through the trails of tears. There's been a large conversation about whether or not black folks was here before Columbus and all that. Now this nigga's a lawyer. He brought it up to the Supreme Court. So he had to have some damn standing. How the fuck did he win that case if what he's saying ain't true? That's a question I want y'all to think about. He wasn't able to just go in court and say, well, we were indigenous to this land and lie. You can't do that in Supreme Court. You have to have standing and you have to have proof. So what did he have to prove that? To make that statement? He got denied several times. He went to law school to fight for citizenship so these folks could cut the check and do the right thing, because a lot of those natives got casinos and much of them were $5 Indians. If you ever watched the Leonardo DiCaprio movie. So that's very, very interesting. That's a very interesting dynamic that that continues to need to be explored. That's a possibility. Because if natives and blacks walk through the trails of tears, that means that they were kicked off. I believe there was reservations, right? But a lot of the Cherokee freedmen now that are suing are saying they got elders that could attest that they was back there in the 1700s and even before that. Now, you can't really argue with them. They would know. So if the elders estate that passed those stories from the 1700s and passed them stories from the 1600s, and part of the testimonies, they were talking about 1492. So that when you go to Supreme Court, you can't just go in there and babble and get some pseudo babbler. You cannot do that in Supreme Court. You have to bring facts and standing. So how was he able to win that court? How was he able to win that citizenship using the terms indigenous American on top of enslaved? They say enslaved Africans, which means Africans from the slave trade. And his claim is that there was black folks before that slave trade. And he won. How did he do that? I want to know. I want to see the paperwork. I said that air quality would be bad. Yeah, it's supposed to be janky. The air quality is supposed to be very janky. So how did he win that? it's a lot to uncover, man. Let's see if I could go grab that bus. Yeah, I decided I was gonna go ahead and cut my Bluetooth off because I like to kind of hear behind me and stuff like that. So I decided to take another route, walking to work. No, I was wondering how the hell did he pass that? I got the paperwork now. A lot of stuff from 1866. But he's making that claim. I don't think he's just saying that to say that. He's a damn lawyer. You know what I'm saying? I don't think he's just saying that. He must have found something out. So that don't mean, of course that don't mean, you know, Negroes need to jump up and jump around a teepee and throw feathers on their damn head and shit like that. Man, get your check. If that's your history, that's your history. We're not gonna jump over it. You know, these natives, they said they was of African descent. He said the other ones were indigenous or whatnot. You know, that's, you know, I want to see more on that. And I'm glad black folks got their damn check, man. You know, I seen a lot of stuff online where they were calling, you know, these brothers that was trying to get their bread, man, pretendians and all that, man. Get your fucking money, man. Because see, let me tell you something. Once the checks start coming out, folks gonna be checking them dolls rolls. When them checks start coming out, they done made this look good. When that money start coming out, folks that was talking shit, they gonna want some money. I guarantee you they gonna want some money. And then if anybody get a letter in the mail saying, well, yeah, you was from this tribe and your folks was enslaved over here. Because, you know, regardless of who enslaved you, checks are owed. You supposed to give us something. You supposed to give the people that was aggrieved something, just like any other country. Just like the Japanese, just like Israel, all of that. People were aggrieved, they need to be compensated. You know? You don't just skip over the history because you don't like it. That's not how that works.
Wait.
My folks was aggrieved. And the brother won. He did what he was supposed to do. So that's one good black lawyer that I could think of. Now I want y'all to think about this with the Black Caucus. Think about the Black Caucus, think about Kamala, think about all those Negroes. All of the so-called lawyers and stuff like that, and these high class HBCUs and stuff, they didn't even have the decency to do what this brother did. The brother's around my age. He got denied several times. Where was the Congressional Black Caucus to speak on behalf of the Cherokee freedmen or any of the people that deserted checks from their tribes and been making money off casinos? Where the hell were they at? They didn't do a damn thing. Real quick, there was a brother where I was coming into work where he does like the shoe shine stuff. Now, I always say hello to him, and it's important we talk to some of the elders to get historical context. And they don't always know things because they, you know, sometimes their parents, sometimes their grandparents and people, they didn't really talk about certain things, not all the time. And so I asked him, I showed him a picture of this Supreme Court win, and I said, do you have family that was on the Dawes roll, or do you have family that was that you heard that was, you know, enslaved by the so-called civilized tribes? And, you know, what did your parents say? And he told me that his folks are from Mississippi and VA. And I asked him, and I mentioned the Dismal Swamp. He didn't know what I was talking about. I said, nobody talked to you about the Dismal Swamp at all? And he said, no. So I thought that was very interesting too. That's how I know that our generation, we the archivists, we really be trying to dig stuff up and learn more about it. So he didn't really know too much about the Dismal Swamp, so maybe they didn't talk about it. But he was from Virginia. And so I showed him the picture of the landmark case with the citizenship thing. And I said, well, they're going to have to do right by them for denying them, you know, that citizenship so they could get their benefits, just like everybody else has got it. And so he said, man, we're going to talk. So I'm kind of interested in, because I don't know a lot of Virginia history. I mean, I know certain things. I know the Harper's Ferry and stuff. I know certain things like that. But Virginia has a lot of black history, man. I mean, yeah, everywhere in America does. But I thought that was very interesting, you know, and I'm glad I asked him about, have you seen this? Like, cause I showed him this and he didn't really know that this case was going on and this kind of stuff. And I thought it was very interesting that, you know, he really didn't know too much about it. A lot of people don't know. I mean, it's not something that people always look for. So, and a lot of times, you know, when things like this happen, people always they're always telling black folks that you ain't gonna get it, or you're not gonna win, or you're not, you know. They said the same thing about civil rights. They said the same thing about the Civil War. They said the same thing about the plantation. So, you know, whatever. But I'm very interested to seeing who's gonna be trying to crowbar their way into this. You know, I'm really interested in seeing, like, is it gonna be some folks that don't come from the background, the blood, the lineage, nothing, and they're just gonna show up with a feather hat on, you know, and then say, well, you know, I need a check. And, you know, it's not a whole bunch of black folks running around here with feathers and stuff like that, you know. So, you know, you might have some Seminoles in Florida, or, you know, you might really have some real, you know, but that's not something you're gonna see. You're not gonna see a bunch of people. But, you know, if you start seeing folks with feathers on, and they start showing up to a lot of these events or whatever they got, you know, I looked my name up. I was just curious because, you know, I know that my sisters, they were half, so they're already in the tribe. They were, I don't remember which one it was, but they already had some kind of benefits or whatever. But it wasn't it was somewhere up north. It wasn't in Oklahoma. It very well could be, you know, it very well could be. But I thought that was kind of interesting. So now I just want to kind of update y'all and let y'all know, man. I talk to old school. You talk to the elders, man, and let you know. And they'll tell you. I said, well, do you know about, did your parents talk about anything before the 1700s, or, you know, stuff like that or whatever? But, you know, I'm getting curious. I want to know, you know, I want to know, you know, I you know, me knowing I like history. It's not to put a feather on and jump around a teepee. You know what I'm saying? You know, I know civilization started at Africa, man. And, you know, people could deny it all they want, but, I mean, you know, it's like me denying that I'm talking on an electronic device. I could call it a pancake. It's not a pancake. So, but, yeah, so I'm going to add this. It's something I thought would be interesting.